Welcome, everybody, both in person and live on live stream. Embarking on the fourth event in Inspired by Alona educational series, we continue to accomplish our mission of honoring our beloved daughter, Alona's inspirational memory and legacy. Our goal in establishing this series was to find a way to help people feel less alone in their challenges and to focus on strengths and embrace differences. Many might wonder why we chose such varied topics, such as embracing those who are differently abled, those in the LGBT plus community, and those who have chosen a different religious path. And now it's not the topic tonight, the out-of-the-box child, strategies for successful parenting. What these topics all have in common is that the populations affected can experience stigmatization and a sense of isolation. Coping with these challenges effectively is not an instinctual process for anyone and often requires professional input and support. And in that way, I'm really thrilled to introduce our esteemed panel of experts who will skillfully and gracefully provide insight and guidance on raising a child who doesn't fit into the mold. And by the way, whose child does. Dr. Rebecca Eliason is a licensed clinical psychologist and consults with schools and families to support optimal student growth. Dr. Eliason served as head of school and previously as director of psychological services at Barnstable Academy. Barnstable Academy is a school that takes the time to understand each student's unique ways of learning to enhance their ability to grow and develop. Shalami Ra, down at the end, is the head of school at Yeshiva Shalshala, the Yeshiva Day School in Bergen County that continues to grow and thrive for students with language-based learning disabilities. Michelle Goodman is a board-certified behavioral analyst specializing in parent coaching for parents and children with developmental disabilities and behavioral challenges. She maintains a private practice in Teaneck, New Jersey. And thank you to our only male on the panel, Dr. Benjamin Gottesman, who's a clinical psychologist and splits his time between a private practice and working at the Clearview School, a day treatment program in Westchester for children with emotional and behavioral difficulties. And I'm also happy to be his proud aunt. And my husband and I would like to extend our most heartfelt gratitude to our truly amazing committee, Rabbi Sarah Markowitz, Rabbi Chevy Newton, Amy Foldman, Rita Schatz, Rizzy Harris, Ann Brodsky, Irene and Robert Gottesman, Amy Brofman, and Andrew Levine. We really have no words to let you know how much we appreciate your dedication, your hard work, and your creativity. We are eternally grateful for your overall support and belief in our mission and the extensive efforts you undertake to ensure that each event is a success. Our beloved Alona lived an extraordinary life. After being diagnosed at 11 months old with SMA type 1, Alona defied all expectations and lived a joyful, meaningful, and vibrant life until the age of 28, when she passed on July 4th, 2021. Alona taught us invaluable lessons on how to embrace differences and perceive strengths as remarkable that were not so readily visible to others. As you can imagine, parenting a child that is so different than all her peers was often not just challenging, but agonizing and isolating. And throw in another child with ADHD, let's just say we were forced to learn creative parenting strategies that we didn't learn from typical parenting guidebooks. And we needed professional input and help. What we did learn from our parenting experience is that every child has strengths that must be cherished, every accomplishment is significant and should be celebrated, and that we needed community support to help our family thrive. So now we are thrilled to proceed with our panel of experts to help parents and grandparents in their child-rearing journey. Two things to mention. We've heard from many people that these discussions have provided valuable insight and support. Please share this recording, which will be posted on our website, with anyone who you think might benefit. And lastly, we will probably have a short Q&A at the end of the session. And let's move on to the show.
Thank you, Nancy. Very excited to be here with all of you and our esteemed panelists here. Just to get ourselves oriented here, I'm just curious in this crowd of people, how many of you have at home, if you feel safe raising your hand, a child who's out of the box, or a grandchild out of the box, or you yourself might identify as out of the box? So a lot of us here, we're in good company, and hopefully we'll learn some wisdom, but you have a lot of wisdom yourselves, and just remember you have a lot of experience, and that's very valuable, and very powerful. So we'll start off by just defining, out of the box is a hard thing to define, but for the purpose of this discussion, let's say if we define out of the box child as a child who deviates from the norm within a community or day school setting, what are some factors that could contribute to a child not fitting into a traditional day school or community setting? So any of the panelists can start us off. What are the factors that might make a kid go out of the box?
Okay, I'll take it. So right off the bat, when I think of an out-of-the-box child, if you were to look at a standard bell curve, I think of the average, the middle of the road, the one standard deviation from the mean in either direction, that's 68%. To me, that's the box. When a child leaves that 68%, that middle in one area, that puts them out of the box of whatever that area is. Be it social, be it emotional, be it academic, developmental, behavioral, it puts them out of the box. So some of the things that contribute to it within our community are when a child isn't into sports, when a child has a specific learning disability, when a child has an emotional struggle, when a child has a social skills deficit, when a child is on the spectrum, when a child has something that's mild or a question in some way that might impact them. It might be diagnostic, it might also not be. Not playing sports on Shabbos, not in the DSM. But it can put a child out of the box, and that can have a real impact on a child. So I think that when we define the box and we look at who's in it and who's out of it, I look at the majority of kids, and then we go outward. And with one area, it pulls you out.
And if I could just kind of add to what you said, I totally agree with you. But just an additional piece, I think, for a lot of our students and our children, it's when you have something going on that's invisible, and you're really struggling and you're trying to fit in that box, but there's something either like Rebecca or Dr. Langston mentioned, something social, something behavioral, something cognitive, and you see your peers being able to navigate successfully, and either you internally know you can't, and you're working extra hard to keep up, visibly you can't. We've done so much work as a community being inclusive and working on including people who perhaps look different. We notice when something is not the same, but embracing people who might be a little bit different, that you don't notice physically that they're different and that they're struggling, also puts you very much outside the box, and sometimes you don't know how to respond or put the supports in place because they look the same. So I think that's another piece of this puzzle.
Yes.
Good answer, Michelle. So a lot of this discussion can be about what parents can do. This idea is to empower parents so that they can help their children or grandparents. So what are some of the challenges that, before we get into solutions, let's get into the challenges. What are some challenges that parents experience when they're raising out out-of-the-box child? Two examples.
Can you actually do the next question also? I want to.
Sure. Okay. They cheated, you gotta do the questions ahead of time.
Yeah.
If anyone can't hear us, just raise your hands. So what are some common mistakes or unsuccessful strategies that you see parents use? So challenges and mistakes.
Right. So, something Shalana said that really resonated with me is that so many of the kids we look at have invisible challenges, which makes the general population really insufficiently sympathetic. So that's a really big challenge for parents. Anyone who's a parent knows, like, you're in the supermarket and your kids are throwing a tantrum, it's embarrassing. Okay, but that's still within normal limits, so whatever. Parents of out-of-the-box children kind of live with this constantly, where they're never sure in any, moment to moment, is my child going to succeed in this environment with this person? Oh, someone else just walked in, well, now the question's back, I don't know. So it's a level of stress that I think people without this gift really have no idea what it is. All the people I work with, I'm always amazed that they are fully dressed and clean, because it is so stressful and so much. Some of them have jobs too, and other kids. It's unbelievable. So there's a level of stress and difficulty that's invisible, because the child's challenges are often invisible. And sometimes they actually look volitional, like this kid is just chutzpahdik. And then there's judgment on the parent, like, what you need to do is let him know who's in charge. Yeah. So, a kid who's a late talker, and parents get suggestions like, have you tried reading to him? That's actually not that helpful. What I tell my clients is that when people say things like that, you should say, wait, let's get a pen. Say that again. Read to him. Got it. Tell him who's the boss. So again, just, in addition to really not knowing how to parent an out-of-the-box child, I want to talk about why. By the way, I'm not going to monopolize the whole thing, but the parenting stuff, that's my biz. So I'll talk less about it. But, train of thought. There's nothing intuitive about it, nothing. So even though your out-of-the-box kid has all the same parts as your in-the-box kid, it's a whole different animal. Like, it has arms and legs, and it eats and cries and does all the same things, but really it's not the same. Because we're wired neurologically to intuitively know how to parent an in-the-box kid. So, most people I work with, at least, are really smart and well-educated and involved parents. Like, that's my average customer. And they are just flummoxed, as they should be, because your out-of-the-box kid makes no sense. Like, the things that should work do not. The things that work with your other kids, forget it. It's not going to happen. Everything you've read, toss that. So, and again, my baseline customer is really smart, well-educated, and involved, and contacting failure after failure. So that's the norm for, I don't think my customer base is different. I think that is what it is when you have an out-of-the-box child. And again, it's because we're neurologically wired to intuitively know how to care for our young when their systems work. So the kids we're looking at, there are systems within systems that are just not functioning as anticipated. And so like, I know in a few minutes we're gonna talk about the school piece, but if you look at the school piece, because I spend a lot of time in schools, so I look at the school piece all the time, and really everything that goes on in a classroom is predicated on a set of assumptions. And the assumptions are that the children in this room bring X, Y, and Z to the table, and that's our baseline, that's our starting place. And that's fair for in-the-box kids. It is fair to assume that children of a certain age, more or less, have skills A, B, and C. When you're looking at out-of-the-box children, so that's not true at all. The question that they might have that skill and not that one, they have islands of skills. So it's like Swiss cheese. And the lesson plans and the social demands and the teacher's expectations and the peers' expectations are all predicated on these great assumptions that, you're a full piece of cheese. And none of our kids are. They have many skills, but you're missing one, the whole thing can fall apart. So, I think when we talk more about the schools, it's not at all surprising to me how much difficulty so many children have in school, because the assumptions are fair, but predicated on certain skills being in place. So the question.
So Michelle, you're saying the challenge is the assumption. The challenge is the mistaken assumptions or the faulty assumptions.
Correct.
These kids are going to need something different,
Yes,
but the assumption is that they just are the standard 68%.
right. So almost like, you just haven't said it loud enough.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a loop that you can get into with punishment. Like, well, if he hasn't learned from it, I'll do it bigger and better. So, like, it's not at all surprising when a parent says to me, head hugging shame, I'm engaging in punishment in a way that makes me sick, and it's not getting me anywhere, and I don't know what to do. And I say, well, that's because you're neurologically set up to put out a stimulus, and if it's not well received, you just make it louder. That's what we do. I can't hear, I turn up the volume. So you understand that it's normal that happens. But the point is that if I keep doing the same thing and I'm not getting anywhere, then doing it louder doesn't do anything other than make it louder. And actually, what it does is it frustrates the parent further and the child further. So I think the common mistake or unsuccessful strategy that I see across parents and teachers of children with all different kinds of profiles is that for the most part, your out-of-the-box child is not a consequent learner. So a consequence is anything that happens after the behavior, right? So a consequence can be a reward, a consequence can be a punishment, a consequence can even be neutral. It just means it's a time-based word, right? So anything that happens consequently. The fact is that when we're looking at our in-the-box neurotypical population, we all rely almost entirely on consequent strategies, not just with kids, but in the world. This is actually not a good example. I thought, it's been kind of polleny out, so I put some tissues here. That's really good planning. I'm bragging, but it's actually very good planning. Whereas typically what happens is you sneeze and then you look for a tissue. That's much more typical, where my behavior is driven by my need, right? Now, I happen to think about it, so but this is an example of antecedent or in advance planning, which is the name of the game with out-of-the-box kids. How do I set up for success? Because with your typical in-the-box kid, you really can scramble and it will be fine. And with your out-of-the-box kid, you'll be sorry. Because your out-of-the-box kid doesn't snap back so easily. And then you can lose whatever momentum you had in that moment. So, I think the single greatest message that I try to share with everyone I work with is that whatever behavior you're looking at, whether it's disruptive, nasty, crying, refusing to talk, like, whatever it looks like, try to think about the story as a timeline and know that your child is likely not going to learn so well from the consequences of his or her actions because that's not the way he or she learns. That's the way neurotypical people learn. I burned myself out. Oh, let me put the pieces together. I touched the stove, it was hot. I didn't like it. I'm not going to do that again. Out-of-the-box children are not good at lining up your variables into a neat little equation. And so they tend to repeat things that make them, like, I don't understand. He went to his room last night and he cried, and then tonight he did the same thing and went to his room and cried. And the third night also, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not that our out-of-the-box children don't have feelings, they do. It's not that they like being sent to their room or losing privileges or being left out, they don't, they hate it. They do not have the wiring to know how to kind of trial and error, figure it out on their own. And that's not a cognitive process. So you can be an out-of-the-box kid and be a genius. You could be an out-of-the-box kid and be, So out-of-the-box is not, it's like acne. You can, have a 30 IQ or 150, whatever. So you can be out of the box and be really, really smart, as are many of the kids we work with. But the things we're talking about are not cognitive things. They circumvent, they go around, they go up and over. And yet, for those of us that are in the box, and as a member of the in the box community, I will say that I represent, I think that like my cognitive capacities and my social emotional capacities are pretty much in sync. And so when you look at neurotypical people, that's a fair assumption, right? So if I'm being exceedingly rude, it's fair for you to kind of look at that and think like, she's rude. She doesn't care, like, ew, right? Because my skill sets are kind of in sync with each other. And you're hearing me talk, I sound pretty smart, so if I'm being exceedingly rude, I must have some semblance of understanding that, like, I'm choosing to do that. But when you're looking at your out-of-box kids, a lot of the behaviors that you see, and if the behavior doesn't mean bad, by the way, a behavior is something I can observe, it's just a verb. So like right now, everyone here is engaged in sitting behavior. So that's just what a behavior is, I can see it.
Michelle, I'm just going to stop you there and open to the panelists. Thank you for the very clear and full answer.
100%.
Dr. Alexander, do you want to add to that? Challenges that parents face and mistakes or common mistakes? Or Michelle, can you capture that?
I think she captured it very well.
Great. So what are some, and you touched on that also throughout your answer, some key strategies or guidance that English parents do? I mean, you kind of alluded to it, just kind of not assuming that they're like other kids, kind of taking each kid on their own. Whether you can start this one, I'll start with Elias. What are some strategies you think parents should know?
Sure. So, I guess one of the pitfalls that parents often fall into, one of the things that we need to know when you do your first Google search, one of the things we learn very early in is the ratio in which we give praise to criticism. Everyone familiar with this, right? So lots of different famous psychologists have different numbers of what they believe that ratio should be. 5 to 1 is pretty middle of the road in that school of thought, which means that for every positive, you should be saying 5 positive things to your child for every negative. When your child is struggling and torturing your soul, that's really hard. But a really great way to practice this as a parent is count. Keep track of yourself the same way with the child. You know, if you're making a check chart for your child, why? So they can visualize it, so they can see it, so they can keep track of it. If this is not something you naturally do because you're human, then perhaps a good strategy might be to carry on a little tablet sheet or keep track of it in your head, right? Then the next 4 things that my child says that don't sit well with me, or that are offensive, or obnoxious, or socially inappropriate, or fill in the blanks. I'm gonna let those next 4 go because I haven't gotten to my next positive one. So keeping that 5-to-1 strategy intact, I think, is really important. One of the other ones that I really did want to bring up at some point tonight is one of the other challenges that I think parents face is when their child is struggling, they often seek out help. They go to a psychologist, they go to a behaviorist, they go to whoever that person is for you. And they research it, especially in our community, there's tremendous amounts of research that goes on to find exactly the right person. And then a week goes, I didn't try with my psychologist. Okay, we're gonna try that one more time. Okay, wait, okay. And what ends up happening is I'll often get calls from families saying, you know, who can you suggest for my child? I've seen these 6 people. In what period of time did you see those 6 people? Okay, and here are all the faults, and here are all the reasons it didn't work. And the reason I wanted to raise this is when a child is struggling, it's very hard to conquer everything at once, right? We want to look at, if it's behavioral, we're going to look at the specific behaviors that we're targeting, that we're working towards improving. If it's social skills, I wish there was a magic wand that we could wave that would improve every child's social skills. Because that's not reality, what ends up happening is we're going to pick a social skill we're going to work on. And here are the different ways we're going to work on it. And we're not going to accomplish everything at once. And the process is slow. But often I watch the setback loop that goes on with kids right now. So my advice to parents would be, do your research. Research well, and then commit, and give that to your child. Give it to them as a commitment, so that way they can follow through and see those skills through and through and graduate successfully, as opposed to feeling that failure time and time again in a more clinical way.
And I'll just add, I think something that is really transformative for parents and teachers is remembering that kids do well if they can. And if a child is not doing well and struggling, it's because they can't in that moment, not because they don't want to or they're not motivated to. Many children, most children, know what's expected of them. So reminding them that not doing what's expected of them is not particularly helpful. And kind of taking a step back to think about, okay, so if this child isn't doing well right now, if they're struggling, if they're going through any particular challenge, taking a step back to recognize where are my expectations and where do the skills of this child lie, whether that be in the academic realm, in the social realm, in the emotional realm, and how can we set realistic expectations that are achievable, and goals that are achievable for this child. If we see a lagging skill as an excuse, we can complain a lot about what's going on for a child, and what they're doing or how they're behaving. If we see it as an explanation, then we can kind of reset and know that in that moment when my child is having a meltdown, they really can't do better in that moment. And maybe the next time they can, but we have to put in the right supports. I do want to say, just echoing what Dr. Eliason said, it's really hard on parents to support children who are struggling. Take a break, model taking a break, and giving your body some space when you're feeling dysregulated. The kids are looking to us in what to do in those moments and how to help them regulate if their emotions overwhelm us all the time. It's also overwhelming to them. And I think it's really important. And there are ways to set if you recognize what these liking skills are, there are ways to set your home up for greater success. And success begets more success. So if you know that transitions can be really, really hard for your child, don't transition suddenly, right? Give them a heads up. We're gonna turn this off in 10 minutes. Set a timer. I notice there's 2 minutes left. And 2 minutes later, we turn it off. They now heard it 2 times. And by the way, say it when you can catch their eyes, not when they're far away screaming, 10 minutes left. We don't process that. If you know that a lot of information coming in at once is gonna overwhelm their system, don't give them 5 directions at once. Get your shoes and put your teeth in them, right? Like, break it down, give them small chunks that they can achieve. But I think that compassion piece and knowing that your child is doing as well as they can in that moment, not necessarily trying to defy you or not listen, is really critical in navigating life with a child who's out of the box.
You speak to the importance of reframing, seeing behavior not as, oppositional or bad, but, your child is just expressing a need, or expressing a mental state or dysregulation.
Yeah, usually when a child behaves in a certain way, they're communicating something to us. It's on us sometimes to figure out what that is, but
That's the function of behavior, it's communicative, right?
Reading that
Yeah,
something?
and I think that in terms of, all of our general happiness, obviously we want to raise great kids, we want our kids to be happy and well-adjusted, and we also want that for ourselves. And when we think of all the things that we're working on with our children, we talk about realistic expectations, right? We want to figure out what we're going to focus on, and that's going to be our goal. We're going to praise the child for success with all of those goals, and praise the process. And I know that's something that we all discuss. It's a very common topic. But part of that also is letting certain things go. If you're right now working on transitions, that means when the child's interrupted at dinner, you're letting them interrupt. Because right now we're praising the interruption. We're praising the transition. So you want to think about what your real goals are for your child. And let's focus on those, let's achieve those, and let's let the other things go to create a positive, happy environment in your home.
Something I see very often is parents are trying to do this, but they don't have a rubric or a system for doing this, and so, mom will say to me, well, I'm working on this, and dad will say, well, I'm doing that, and that's not a good system at all. Yeah, so really, I think what you're talking about is how we need to help parents establish a hierarchy of needs and really commit. And the challenge there is that parents often worry, wait, so if I'm working on transitions and he's being rude at the table and I'm doing nothing, I'm endorsing it, so I don't want to do that, what's happening? I need to let him know that's not right. And the answer is, yeah, you need to do all of these things. Unfortunately, your out-of-the-box child isn't learning all of these things at the same time. So if you actually want him to learn these things, you're going to have to get really expert at your packaging and delivery, much of which is rooted in your timing. So that's a hard sell for a lot of folks, where you have a kid whose behavior can look really abominable. And the bottom line is, I really want this child to learn how to do better. And so part of that is that I need to shelve that particular behavior right now in service of what I've identified is foundational. And that is really hard for parents to do, because when you look at behavior problems, I think the biggest challenge is that they look bad until they're gone. So I always think about that show, The Biggest Loser, where the contestant starts at 600 pounds. And then they lose 180 pounds. And to my naked eye, I'm like, yeah, you're great. But they weigh, I did the 420 pounds. You know, to the naked eye, that's still very not okay looking. And yet there's been a huge progression, huge change, huge. But to the naked eye, I don't know. And that's really where we live with our out-of-the-box kids, where they are making gains and leaps and bounds. And to the regular people looking, they're like, he's chutzpah, he's lazy. You could just cry. Now, to be clear, our kids engage in behaviors that can look extremely chutzpah and lazy. So I will kind of look at a kid and say to a parent, yeah, his behavior does look lazy, I hear you. Let's unpack that, like, what does that mean? So, you know, it's kind of lazy and chutzpah are the big ones I get, and to be clear, the parents are good reporters. The kids look lazy and chutzpah. But to kind of leave it there would be okay if I were talking about an in-the-box kid whose behaviors that he puts out are in sync with his intentions and his skills. As soon as I have a kid whose intentions and skills don't match what he knows how to do, he's gonna look not so pretty a lot of the time. So back to what Dr. Eliason said, in terms of really working towards positively reinforcing our kids, it is a job and a half with kids who are not putting out the kind of behaviors we want. And in fact, they may be putting out a lot of ick. And so one of the things we have to get adept at is heavily reinforcing the absence of ick, which is not something normal people do. So the example I like to give is, at no point have you thought, oh, we're so glad that the panelists aren't hating us. That's a weird thought. Or, I'm so glad that there's no predator in here, that it doesn't stink. Like, these are weird thoughts to have that, like, people who have them, not so lucky, right? Now, the reason we don't have these thoughts is because they're grossly inefficient. If you were to sit here, like you're trying to listen to us and thinking about these things, and also being thrilled that there's no predator in here, that it doesn't smell like manure, like you can't do all those things. So instead you just stay focused on what's salient, which is this. So for this reason, it is really unnatural, it is totally artificial. If I have a kid who's chutzpah a lot, it's grossly artificial for me to notice the moments when he's just being quiet. That's not a normal thing to do, and yet that's the money. Yeah, because the way that I'm going to help him get good at a skill, whether it's playing tennis or being pleasant or anything else, is for him to practice doing it well. And so it means that, you know, sometimes I'll join a family for dinner so I can model. And I'll say, I want you to notice when the steak is in his mouth and he's chewing, because he's not going to be saying nasty when there's steak in there. So, you know, that's your cue. So, Maishi is chewing his steak. And look at you, Maishi, I gotta tell you, loving having dinner with you. It's a pleasure. I know everyone's getting along so well. We're doing great here, just loving it. Maishi. Now, it's completely artificial. And literally, I'm like waiting. My prompt is that there's steak in the child's mouth. What have we come to? What we've come to is that I need to be utilizing artificial means to help him. Yeah.
Not to worry about the predator, but to worry about the training. So what you panelists are speaking to this idea, like oftentimes out-of-the-box kids can be very difficult to parent, not intuitive, sometimes very unpleasant, you know, whatever. And I can imagine it's hard sometimes to delight in a kid who's acting in such a way. But we know that as research or developmental trajectories, it's very important for parents to delight in their children, to find ways to enjoy them. So how would you recommend parents do that? What are some strategies or ways that parents can connect with, delight in their kids when they're often challenging?
I mean, I think that many of these children that we're talking about that have, that are out of the box, they also have a lot of talents. You can find their talents, and you should also feel good about them. Spend some time with them, let them pick the game, even if it's for 10 minutes, low stakes, without putting all that pressure on them. There are moments that you can connect and that you can see them in all their glory, not focusing on the things that they're not good at. I think is really important for a lot of these kids, and less about how they're not fitting into the box and finding the joy in who they are. It can be hard sometimes, especially in those really stressful moments, but I think I can even speak myself as a parent of an out-of-the-box child. It's really like she has so many strengths, and we really focus on those and less about the challenges.
So one of the strategies I love is to find a time that suits your family's life and take 10 minutes a day, 10 minutes every other day, 5 days a week, even day, whatever your jam is, and have it be a set process, to have set quality time with your child doing something they love. It could be playing video games, so that's like literally my last choice. It could be going for a walk together, it could be playing basketball together, it could be playing Monopoly together. Find something that they love. That activity that they thrive in, even if it's not your favorite, to find that time to do it with them. Have it be a set time. 5 minutes, 10 minutes is typically the magic number. Every day, once a week, twice a week, whatever your schedule allows, to create that positive relationship, to create that cycle of positivity, and to delight in and enjoy your child when they're in their element. I think that's just.
I think there's also a piece in which when we're struggling to delight in our children, there's some self-talk that can help, where I can say to myself, I'm gonna delight in him, come hell or high water, I'm delighted. I'm delighted is happening, this is definitely gonna happen. And so my commitment is, like you said, and you know, I think a lot of times parents will say, I'm gonna spend all this time, and I'm like, okay, pick 5 minutes that you're committing to, and let's, you and I, sync our timers to go off, because I'm gonna text you and say, did you do your 5 minutes? Accountability helps, but like, if you think you're gonna get more than 5 minutes, think again. You know, you have dinner and children and your child is not easy, please. So, you know, aim small, but plan for, you know, my child likes Monopoly, so I'm going to play Monopoly with him. And so here's another thing, a lot of kids that are out of the box can sometimes get very unpleasant. So a parent might approach a child and say, it's our special time, let's play Monopoly. And the child will say, I'm playing with you. I hate Monopoly. And then the parent texts me, I don't know what's happening here. What's happening, right? So, you want to say something about that? No. So what's happening here is that most of our out-of-the-box kids don't transition so easily. And so if the child was thinking about something or thinking about nothing, and then suddenly you appeared with Monopoly, that's a transition. And his brain needs a minute to catch up. And so a lot of our kids develop what I call a reflex no. Anything you say, like a dad called me a couple weeks ago, he's like, I'm really confused. I said, hey, you want to go get ice cream? And my child kicked me. And I'm like, well, you asked for it. So, you know, really, so like, how can this be? Like, I was thinking, what's happening? What's happening is that sometimes the language processing speed is not in sync with other components. The child needs a minute, and so the child who's bright has learned to protect himself by having a built-in reflex no. Anything you say, I make a face and I say no. And then 6 minutes later, I come and I say, you know what? Chocolate cone would be good. And of course, at this point, the parent is like, what? Like, I don't like him anymore, like, what's happening? You know, so I think just knowing this in advance, that it's not enough to sync your phone and have the buzzer going off and committing to Monopoly, and it's also like really planning, what does your approach look like, and working on it, committing to it, and reminding yourself, like, I'm a great mother. I'm a really great mother, and I'm a great mother. Because the evidence might suggest otherwise. I can speak for myself. I am an out-of-the-box child. I'm a great mother.
So moving on to schools, because as you can imagine, many schools are not built for out-of-the-box kids. They're very much prototypical. They're really prototypical boxes. So just for anyone who can answer, since you have a lot of experience in schools, to what extent should parents or schools' efforts be to get the out-of-the-box child back into the box? Or should the focus be more on accommodating or celebrating the child's differences? So what's the balance between, getting them to fit in versus kind of accepting them as who they are and working with that?
It's a great question. I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. But I don't think that we should ever try to get an out-of-the-box child back into the box. I would phrase it differently. So too, it's not celebrating the differences, we're celebrating the strengths. So in terms of, accommodating or, getting them back in the box, we want to, again, always shift back to like identifying what are the lagging skills, what are the areas of making this child struggle in a school. Is it the social? Is it the emotional? Is it the cognitive? Is it a mixture of all of them? And I think that schools and parents always should be communicative and working together about how to support a child in school. It really is an intensive partnership and teamwork on both parts. Again, figuring out how to support a child and build those skills, and also celebrate their strengths, and also give them the opportunity to shine. And it can be, any myriad of strategies that we might use to support a child being able to fit in a more in-box setting. If a child has a slower processing speech, just at the top of my head, because Michelle just mentioned it, right? And they may get like super overwhelmed in a classroom when, a teacher asks a question and they want to say an answer, but everybody else is like, ooh, and they're just like, I can't figure out what I want to say quick enough, and that's really overwhelming. And the luckier kids will just keep quiet and not raise their hands, and the less lucky kids will be silly or put something out really impulsively and be disruptive. And figuring out if that's something that's a struggle for a kid and making them react in that way, like with a teacher, letting them know beforehand what you're going to call them for, or sometimes even letting the class know, like, you know what, it's really distracting to, Adam, when everybody goes, ooh, me, when he's waiting to talk, we're going to keep our hands down until he's done talking, and then you guys can raise your hands again. Like, that's something that can really accommodate a child and make that classroom accessible and more in the box. And so too, it can be super athletic and super creative, and you can always celebrate those strengths and those talents. So they're not mutually exclusive, but I think we're constantly need to take that step back and recognize, like, what is causing that struggle, and what is the lagging skill, and how can we support it?
Yeah, so when I look at the balance of course, it's a mix of both, right? How much we should intervene and how much we should let the child, right, and praise and celebrate. But the thing I always think about is their key milestones. If they're past certain ages and they're not achieving certain milestones, whether it's walking, talking, speaking, whether it's reading, writing, and math, whether it's making a friend, whether it's making multiple friends, whether it's maintaining eye contact, whether it's panic attacks and anxiety, whatever it is, if we are deviating that much from the norm and we're not able, and the children are not able to achieve their milestones, then yes, it might be defined as out of the box, but that requires a much higher level of parent intervention. Where I want to chime in though is when we say out of the box, in preparation for this, one of the first things I was Googling around with was the out of the box, how other people outside of our Dalit almost define it. And in the little people educational world, out of the box is a negative connotation. It means typically people think of out of the box as sort of below that average mark. It has a real negative, and everyone says, no, it's great. And we all know that when people say out of the box, they're thinking, oh, there's a problem. And it's funny, but when people are older, you look at adults, it's those out of the box thinkers that are the CEOs of all the companies, right? My claim to fame in the educational world is that I think in an out of the box way for kids. But yet for children, we say, wait, you're out of the box, and that's a bad thing. So I feel like what I want to separate out here is the difference between being out of the box and having either a disability or a deficit that we need to address in an academic way, in a treatment plan, versus being out of the box because there's something that's unique about you, and there's something that's special about you, and there's something that we should be nurturing because the potential that that child has is truly exceptional and different from other children. And often they go hands in hands. It could be that when you struggle in one area, it leaves extra room over here to excel. Sometimes those kids, I was thinking about a student recently who had a reading disability and was the most gifted artist. I mean, full ride to college, and what she's doing now, I think we would all say, oh my goodness, isn't that amazing? So the question is, where are we going to focus on it? Do we spend all of our effort on the reading disability? Yes, we need to pay attention to that. But we also need to notice that this child has so many other strengths and things that we can work on and work with that child out, because their ability to achieve is similarly exceptional. And out of the box isn't just the bottom part of the box, and that's real. So that's what I wanted to say.
I think parents very often live in Sophie's choice, where they have a menu of really bad options and they have to pick from that menu. That's a terrible place to be, but that's where parents often live. I think, to your point, very often we'll have a child who really needs a tremendous amount of academic support outside of school, and she really likes to dance. So the school has told the parent, she needs help with reading and math and science and social studies and Ivrit, and she can't find the place in the Chumash. So we need a lot of tutors, and there just aren't enough hours in the day, and so the child doesn't go to dance anymore. And that's devastating, because the child is a dancer. Even if it doesn't look like that to you, I was that kind of kid where I was a dancer in my heart. So if you want a child who's a dancer in her heart, believe her, she's a dancer. And yes, she needs to learn to read and write and find a place in the Chumash and do all of those things, but not at the expense of taking a dance class once a week and being in a recital with a tutu, and when you get judgment coming from the teacher who says well, she's going to dance, just say she is and move on. There's not a lot you can do, but it's the right thing. But give this child what she needs to celebrate who she is. The last thing you want to get rid of is her dance class.
Any advice for, you touched on it, Michelle, just now, but how parents should advocate for their kids in schools. Let's say kids are getting a lot of homework, or schools are doing something, they're punishing a kid in an inappropriate way for some behavior, and the parent wants to speak to the school about that. Ideas about how do you approach it in school? Do you get involved, or is that make you label you as a difficult parent, or what do you thoughts about that?
Like I said, I spent a lot of time in schools. And the answer is it really depends on who the administrator and who the teacher is. Because there are some administrators out there that I just love working with because they're like that combination of smart and menschy. So when you have an administrator or a teacher who's smart and menschy, you should absolutely advocate for your child to the best of your ability and keep going. Once you've identified that your partner is, not fabulous, that has to inform your advocacy because you're going to get nowhere really fast and frustrate yourself further and make the teacher dislike your child even more because now it's related to you who they don't like. So I think so much of it is like there's not a set, I advocate to here but not there. It's like, who is my partner here? And now it's a go, or it's a, yeah, that ship has sailed, nobody's home. And it's devastating, but sometimes just kind of taking stock of who's there will inform, like, I'm gonna focus my energy maybe on helping my child develop some kind of compensatory strategy for getting through math this year. But this is not a partner that I can advocate with.
I just want to add to that. I think one of the most common things I hear, and if I had a nickel for every parent who apologized for advocating, parents feel this need to go and say, I'm so sorry, I don't want to bother you, but fill in the terrible story. This happened, this is what my child needs. And I would love to empower the parents as much as I can. You don't have to feel bad in advocating for your child. That's your job. If not you, then who? So I agree with Michelle. If you know you're not going to win and you're not advocating for your child to a wall, fine. But see if you can make partners. Most people in education in schools care about children and want to partner with you. So find a way that you can connect with the administrator or the teacher to form a positive relationship, to collaborate together, to get their advice, to create a through line of communication so they can hear what you have to say. So you can advocate for your child. So at night, when your child is so anxious because they got too much homework, and you see that there's going to be a panic attack or a meltdown, when you check whatever your online school forum is, and you see that coming, you can reach out to the school and preempt it. So I highly encourage you to make a positive partnership and to follow up with that by advocating for your child.
I would just echo that and say it's not most people who work in schools who want to do well by your child. Know that everybody who works in a school who went into education wants to do right by your child. And so do you. And you are your child's best advocate, hands down. And I think going into conversations with teachers, and so too teachers with parents and schools with parents, having that at the forefront of our minds, right? Not coming in defensively or accusatory, right? You gave so much homework, it's just too much, you know that, right? But I know that this is really important, and also my child is really feeling very overwhelmed. I do think there's a way that we could work together to find a better solution. I would also say this is something that has come up a few times in our conversation that I wanted to share. Including your child in that problem-solving piece is extremely important. That doesn't mean you let your child call all the shots, because they'll probably say, can you ask me more? I just not have homework at all anymore, because that's what's beneficial for them. So, problem solving together means it has to be mutually beneficial, but more often than not, your kids will come up with some pretty, creative strategies, and teachers will want to partner together. And if you can have them share their concerns and help the kids feel validated, that the teacher understands, because the problem's not necessarily only happening at home, right? Like, it's happening in school too, so you want to be able to work together with a teacher, and they really, more often than not, knowing that you understand, you know, they're going through and they too know what you're going through, that will create a really nice working relationship to help your kid thrive in that setting. So I would encourage it.
Oh, I think another good strategy is to, like this time of year, sit down with your administrator to talk about a good shidduch for next year. You know, that's a really good antecedent planning where if I can find a teacher who's gonna celebrate my child, that's a better move than someone who finds kids like mine really agitating. So, you know, I think that that's time very well spent. And if there is an administrator that you can partner with and will have that conversation, I mean, don't expect them to say, oh, this teacher's nasty, so no, like, that's not gonna happen. But if you can say, you know, I think my child does best with a teacher who has these characteristics. And, you know, usually it's easiest for people with these characteristics to really get a kid. So, you have anyone like that? Like, it's really a good investment.
This question wasn't on the list, so forgive me. But I wanted to ask you, there are some kids who, for whatever reason, there's no Jewish school out there for them. You show me your school did a great job of creating a new kind of place of very county for kids who previously didn't have a place to go in the Jewish community. But there are still kids who can't, you know, for whatever reason, have to go to public school or other private schools that are not Jewish. So what would you say to those parents who have to make that choice? Any words of support, advice for them?
First thing I would say is, it's a really hard thing to go through, so I'm really sorry that you have to go through that. To have to make the decision between keeping your kid in a Jewish setting versus a school that's going to give them what they need is really can be impossible. Having that said, if a child is in a place where they feel unsuccessful and unsafe, they're not gonna get what you hope they would get out of that setting. So meaning, if you're in a Jewish day school, but you're not feeling successful, and you become the child who's reacting behaviorally and constantly being sent to the principal's office and receiving a lot of negative messages about who you are, you probably also won't love Judaism. So exploring, I wish that there was more available for our community, and I hope, and I am hopeful that we will continue to grow and develop schools for every type of child who deserves a school that's just right for them, and that our schools already have grown tremendously in incorporating additional resources and programs internally for inclusion opportunities. But it's okay to explore outside to give your kid what they need, because really that's what's so much comes from the home. And it's going to be tricky to navigate, but I think if a child doesn't feel safe, then all bets are off. So.
Sure, I'll jump in on this. So the question of switching to a non-Jewish school, so it's a very sensitive topic, it's a very hard topic. I think that one of the things that parents need to look at when you're faced with that question is what the gap looks like between your child's growth and their peers' growth. So if socially your child is developing at this rate and the other children are developing at this rate, then the gap is continuing to grow and we're not closing it quickly enough, even though your child is in fact continuing to progress. Whereas if your child is growing and developing faster than their peers, where that gap is going to close, then we're on a great trajectory, and that's wonderful. So often, people will say, great, my child's reading skills have grown so much. And I'm looking at the report and saying, they have, but not proportionally enough. So it's great, they did learn, their fluency has improved, that's excellent. but what they need to get the skills as quickly as they need them and as well as they need them is something different. So the question is, where is your child and what does that gap look like? And how close are we to closing that gap in a reasonable amount of time to help make your child successful? And that obviously impacts so many things. If your child isn't successful in school, now we're looking at all of the other impacts. You know, the self-confidence, the social, the emotional, all of the things that go into when a child isn't successful. And that's not just academic. I mean, academic, you know, in schools for children who have learning disabilities, that's one type of school. There are also other types of schools. There are therapeutic schools. There are programs that are more focused on behavioral, children struggle with behavioral issues and things like that. So there are all different types of schools and programs. No one's first choice is to start their child in yeshiva and take them out of yeshiva. But what I would encourage parents to think about is when you're balancing what the cost benefit is. So you might, for example, find that for your child, yes, you might remedy this issue, but actually by moving based on my child's entire profile, it actually might create other struggles, right? So by moving them to a non-Jewish school, my child struggles a little bit socially too. It's not just about the learning disability, and it's going to create significant social challenges for them. And how do we weather that? Maybe I'm better off supplementing the academic piece. So when you're looking at schools and you're seeing a significant struggle in the school you're in, it could be that actually you perfectly remedied somewhere else. It also could be that maybe there's things that we can do supplementally to keep that child in yeshiva. And similarly, one of the things that you want to think about if you are going down that path is what your path back needs to look like. What are the skills and goals that I need to accomplish, my child needs to accomplish in order for my child to go back, if that's in fact your goal? Or, no, great, my child is successful where they are, hopefully well left alone, and that's fine too. Judgment for you, do whatever works for you. But if you have a long-term plan of also transitioning your child back, that's a plan you want to discuss and make with the school right from the beginning and target those goals and figure out how you're going to achieve them to come back.
I think that very often parents can't know, will we be able to transition to back? I mean, you're leaving because your child's skills are not where they need to be. So that's why you're leaving. And while, I hope against all hope that my child will catch up and fill in the gap, I can't know. So I think that's very hard for a lot of parents, the not knowing. And no one signs up to have an out-of-the-box kid. No one I know. Like, nobody likes that. I have adult nieces who are having babies now, and every time they get pregnant, I say, remember, in the box kid. It's very good advice, because as soon as you don't have that, all bets are off. Some of the yeshivas have really been trying to partner with parents where a kid is going elsewhere for school and, a couple days a week, maybe the kid comes in after school to join their, grade for some activity, like just to keep the child's relationship positive with the school. But I think that you can't know necessarily. So I think just accepting the not knowing is part of the whole, accepting, again, no one signs up for this. So that's your starting place. I didn't sign up for this, which includes, why can't my kid make it in the yeshivas? We don't know why, we just know that. If that's what's happening, that's how it is, and now you have a menu of choices, and you don't like anything on the menu. Well, that's not fair, but that's the reality sometimes. So I think, where sometimes parents go wrong is they engage in what I call unwarranted optimism, where you maintain the fantasy, no, I'm gonna keep him in yeshiva because I'm gonna, it's gonna work out. And sometimes it's not going to work out, because like Dr. Eliza said, the gap continues to grow, yeah? And what I want doesn't always match what I have. So I think knowing that is extremely painful, but it is a reality sometimes.
So I think the last question, I'm just gonna, each panelist, you can just share any final thoughts, advice, anything that we didn't touch on, any questions that you wanted to share to parents of out-of-the-box kids. Any parting thoughts? There's a lot more questions that you can get to, but it's 9:20, and kids that are suspect to be parents of out-of-box kids tomorrow. So, you want to start us off, Shalani, final, anything that we didn't touch on that you wanted to share that you thought was important for parents to know?
I think that consistency is key for a lot of these kids. And also, seek out the resources. Like, there are people who can help and who can guide. But I will say this both as an educator and as a parent who is involved with out-of-box kids all the time. All of those experts are there to give you expert advice and will listen to you and can even personalize it, but you are the expert in your child, and you should always do and advocate in the way that feels right for you. Nobody's going to be able to tell you what to do and what is right or what's wrong, so you should have that confidence in yourself that, whether it comes to switching schools, staying in schools, Jewish, non-Jewish, again, you can seek your guidance, you can go to your rabbi, you can go to your psychologist, psychiatrist, but ultimately, you have to do what feels right for you, and this is really uncharted territory. Every child is different. These children, I think we've all mentioned this more than once, don't come with user manuals, and often raising them is really not intuitive. So you should seek that guidance, and also, I think, know that as a parent, you should feel that you can.
And don't ever work with a clinician who makes you feel terrible. A lot of people don't know this, but they can leave. So, we finally got in with this adult adore who makes you want to shoot yourself and makes you feel like it's your fault. You need to not go again. So, thankfully, I think most of the clinicians out there don't do that, but I've worked with enough parents who come to me bleeding from experiences they've had. And, what they all have in common is clinician misbehavior. So, if you as a parent or your friend is a parent who is getting browbeaten by a clinician, they should help them own that, and that they're not signed up for that.
My final thought would just be to look around at who the potential partners you can have are. Parenting out of the box child can be lonely, it can be hard, it can be aggravating, it can be stressful, and for yourself and for your child. So it's okay to turn to the school and say, hey, I need help, and find your partners there. It's okay to turn to friends and say, hey, here's what I'm going through. I find that people want to be helpful and people want to be supportive, and people also often don't know because it's invisible, and people also don't know what to say and what to do. And it's okay to turn to a friend or to a neighbor or to the school and to ask for support and partnership.
Are we doing Q&A also? Okay. So any questions in the room, please raise your hands. Is there a microphone we can pass on? Okay, take mine. It's fine.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna try and phrase it in a question form. When you have a kid who a lot of times does,
so you can expect from him to continue acting that way, but then all of a sudden, like, changes, and then, like, let's say this medicine wears off, or just in general, if you see that they do have the potential, because a lot of times they are acting like your other kids act, and then they don't, like what you said before, like, the equation is just not the same for that kid, but sometimes it is the same, so then, as us as parents get very frustrated, like, I know you can act and respond in a normal way sometimes, but then other times, totally, the equation's just not there. So I'm just wondering, how do we parent a kid like that, where you know that they can, but then a lot of the times they can't?
I'll take this one. What you're talking about is a fluency issue. So fluency is two things, it's speed and accuracy. Right. So my English is completely fluent. I can be sitting Shiva, I can have the flu. Under all conditions, I can both speak in English and understand what you say to me in English. My Hebrew is a mixed bag. So depending on the content of a conversation, I can sometimes sound like a very fluent speaker, but if the content is not so familiar to me, I'll be hemming and hawing. And so under those non-optimal conditions, my fluency will not be intact. Then if I look at my Portuguese, I don't know how to say hello even, completely disfluent. So what you're talking about is Hebrew. You're talking about, wait, I'm looking at a kid who is displaying certain skills under certain conditions, like optimal conditions, and then as he practices it more and more, even suboptimal conditions. But when things are really not aligned, you might see he can't employ these skills at all. And the biggest mistake is to look at that and think, it's volitional. What a jerk. Yeah. Because a kid who is motivated to engage in pro-social behaviors, that means that he finds it rewarding to do so. And so when he's not doing that, it's not because he forgot that he likes the way he feels when he's being pro-socially engaged. It's because there's something that's not optimal in the environmental condition that will support him. And so just knowing that, I think it helps for the parent to say to himself, oh, he's not doing, like, he can do the bedtime routine nicely. I know he did it on Tuesday and Wednesday, now it's Thursday, he's being a crazy guy, so, you know, what's up with that? Maybe he's more tired today. What it is that the skill is not yet fluent enough that he can kind of just whip it out under whatever the conditions are. Like you said, the medicine wears off, he's a little hungrier, a little more tired, some of his feelings in school, whatever it is. So, you know, I think the key is for parents to really become expert at understanding how fluency in learning works, and to fully expect to see variability in a child's response set until a skill is completely fluent. And again, our out-of-the-box kids, their learning isn't so neatly packaged. So what you're describing, you should expect that.
I think we have one more question. Well, two more questions. It's just, you want to go first? Rosa Martins?
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you so much. It's so exciting. You said one more question. I'm scared. Okay, two questions. One is, what advice would you give grandparents? And then the second question, which is totally unrelated, is maybe more specifically. So what if you're an expert in your child, except not an expert at all in figuring out and deciphering what's fluent, what's not, what's behavioral, what's learning. Who do you even go to? Like, how do you start the process? How do I know? How do I even know which expert to go to? There's so many things. You said to do research, which makes sense, but I guess, are there specific strategies where, you have to start somewhere, where do you start? As opposed to, Google, it says, many antecedents, that's something to do for 9:30 and every 2 minutes. Yeah, so I guess those are my two very different questions. Okay, sorry.
Depending on the nature of the issue, a good starting place would be potentially a neuropsych evaluation. So for many of the categories we've covered that are academic, many social, some of the emotional, and I think most of the things we covered that are now impacting the child in school, a neuropsych is a pretty good starting place. And those results from that evaluation are going to guide what the next steps would be. So if we're seeing that their challenges are more social emotional and what those are going to look like, if we're seeing they're more academic, if we're seeing the behavioral indices are high, and that's going to guide the next few steps. Good shot at that point, the neuropsychologist who did that evaluation is going to give you, in the back of that report, a little recommendation section. In that section, certain things are going to be there, like highly suggest therapy on a weekly basis, doing cognitive behavioral therapy, DBT, whatever it is. Suggest intervention with a behaviorist. Suggest doing Orton Gillingham for your reading disability, something like that. And that's going to guide your next few steps. So I think that's starting ground. If you don't know what you have, that's a good evaluation to see what you have to now figure out your next steps.
You took the words right out of my mouth. It's one of the best starting places because it's not, you know, it can be really tricky when you're trying to figure things out. Sometimes it's able to get an evaluation through Bergen County or, right, or wherever you live. And schools will oftentimes help those services come. And it's really easier to identify whether you can get services or not, and qualify for services, but it's not necessarily diagnostic in nature, and it doesn't always provide a roadmap of things or a blueprint of what you're supposed to do. So if you can, when we go back to that, like guiding skills, you know, when you're thinking, identifying why a kid is struggling is really going to be the starting point for figuring out how to help them. In terms of grandparents, that was also part of your question. I think I would say to grandparents knowing that if your child is losing an out of touch child, don't assume that your parenting strategies for your child is just going to work on their child, and listen to your children and what they need. Give them a break. Take the kids out for a little bit if you can manage, and ask how you can support. Don't assume that you can parent or use those parenting strategies and assume that you deliver your kids. I think that would be probably the most helpful thing.
We take the last question in the back.
Thank you. First of all, thank you again. So I know you all touched on some main scenarios and relationships between parents and child with a lot of implications and 5 goals, and also as far as advocacy between the parents and the school's administration from an academic standpoint. But what about what are your suggestions regarding when kids have an emotional, social issue, or anxious, and having difficult developing friendships? And that's what we keep the kids. So we have very little transparency or control in that area as a parent. So what do you suggest from that point?
I would definitely wanted to jump in. That's an excellent question. I'm going to go back again to understanding why a child is struggling, because you can struggle in the social realm for a myriad of reasons. Whether you have ADHD and executive functioning difficulties, there could be some social pieces there, like you work things out in some ways, but you're very socially driven. Or there could be these, like, you don't pick up on social cues that are not explicitly stated, and that could be driving your social challenges or your health anxiety. If you identify what's going on for a child and why they're having a social challenge, you can practice and plan ahead of time and put proactive things in place to facilitate play dates that can be more successful. You can pick a game and practice like taking turns, or how to figure out if the friends are having a good time, or to give them the choice, or how to end a play date successfully. Those are things you can practice with kids ahead of time and stay close by. Or if you know your kid needs like less of a heavy lift, they can't just like make conversation, plan a specific activity that they can do, like they can be baking together, right? Like that's not a heavy lift in dialogue and conversation. So I think knowing why your child struggles and then being very mindful and proactive about it can really help facilitate more successful friendships and play dates instead of just like kind of letting it be and happening and hoping for the best.
If you can find a peer model in the community, that's your best medicine. So it's not so easy to find. It could be like talking to the Markowitz and saying, I need a 12-year-old girl. And like really networking and doing what you can and going to the library, talking to the librarian, like sometimes if you can identify a good peer model, then you actually can do guided play dates in your home. And to your point, the child's struggling socially, you're not in the social milieu, so what can you do? If you can find a peer model and make a nice shift, you can actually support them through some play dates until they get a little bit better.
That's all we have time for today. So thank you, Shulami, Michelle, Dr. Madison. Thank all of you for coming out tonight. And stay tuned for the next study.
We really appreciate your attending. Stay tuned for the next Inspire Alumni session. I would really appreciate if everyone here just sent an email to inspiredbylona.com just to let us know you were here. And also feel free to add comments on what you'd like to see next and whatever happens. I think they will be Myra next door right now. Have a good night.